Greetings, mind crafters, and welcome to another exciting Minecraft episode. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here in northern Vermont, thrilled beyond imaginability to have this talk about the very simple fact that life is just a test. That's it. It's only a test. We often run around like life is an emergency. It's not an emergency, thankfully, most of the time. When we get those, horrible curveballs thrown at us, thankfully, they're typically fewer and far between. They're not the majority of the time. In fact, most of the time, thankfully, life is not even an urgency. And my inspiration today comes from Dr. Richard Carlson. He is the author of the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books. There's a bunch of them, and they're these little paperbacks, that just sort of give you a daily something to ponder and something positive to affirm and work into your life. And I really like him. So Richard starts off by saying, one of my favorite posters says, "Life is a test. It's only a test." Had this been real life, you would have been instructed where to go and what to do. I love that. Whenever I think of this humorous bit of wisdom, it reminds me to not take my life so seriously. And of all the different epidemics, quote unquote, I could do air quotes here. I'll just kind of tell you about that. Air quotes. Epidemics in the country. We've got loneliness is definitely an epidemic. It's right up there in the United States anyway, listed with smoking and heart disease as a leading cause of death. So that's what I'm not saying that lightly, just being all touchy feely and lightly. It's actually though that's a true statement right there. And also, I think, and this one is coming from me, but I think over seriousness, if it's not an epidemic, it's certainly whatever's right below that, because I think we have a tendency to get very caught up in our heads. We get very caught up in our heads. Anxiety is absolutely an epidemic. And we do a lot of what if thinking and what if this and what if that and what if I don't graduate? What if I don't get the job? Let's fast forward to the season crew. Um, what if I don't have enough saved in retirement? What if I'm so sick of my job and stuck in it, but I'm 50? And what do I do now? What if this? What if that? And then there's all the catastrophizing. And it's just urgency, urgency. So with the brain, remember, doesn't know the difference between what we create as an urgency or emergency and what's an actual urgency or emergency. And so when we do this constant overthinking and dissecting of our lives and ruminating over the woulda, coulda, shouldas and all of that, the brain is in DEFCON 4 mode. And this also takes in the bigger picture takes a huge toll on the body as well. So Richard continues, he says, when you look at life and its many challenges as a test or series of tests, you begin to see each issue you face as an opportunity to grow, a chance to roll with the punches. I love that right now. Whether you're being bombarded with problems, responsibilities, even insurmountable hurdles, when looked at as a test, you always have the chance to succeed in a sense of sort of rising above that which is challenging you. What else I love is Wayne Dyer, when, Richard's talking about having problems here, right? Wayne Dyer says, basically, it's a tough sell when you're in it, of course, but really we want to kind of have some gratitude there, because the only people without problems are dead, when you look at it that way. And the thing is, and life is meant to absolutely be enjoyed and to learn, mainly the number one, in my opinion, is learn how to love each other, ourselves, and then each other better. That's like the main theme of life on this planet. And also to enjoy the ride, to really enjoy the ride, the very enriched ride. And that said, obviously we want to just focus on all these wonderful and rich life experiences, and and invite as much joy as possible and depth, spiritual depth into our lives, and to realize that without sucker punches, as we might want to call them, or without life's curveballs, there would be no growth, really. It's like super Buddhists, the Buddhists, and I'm not saying I'm in this place where I'm inviting it, but the Buddhists actually invite the contrast, because that is how spiritual growth happens. And lots of people talk about contrast. Most recently, I've been listening to, well, listen to lots of people, but it's sort of making me think of Abraham Hicks right now, because she talks about what we would call the contrast. So let's say it's on a light level. You got, a couple of people at work who just aren't the healthiest. Maybe they've got some narcissistic tendencies. Maybe they're, just looking out for themselves, and maybe even manipulating and sabotaging and everything. And this contrast is there, and we're like, what, WTF? I'm a good vibe. I'm just trying to work with everybody. What is up with this? When we shift out of that place with the contrast, like, what is this contrast doing here? Why is it in my life? Well, we're going to have contrast in our lives. It doesn't give those people a pass. It doesn't give the snarkies a pass. It doesn't give people a pass for the petty behavior. It definitely doesn't give anybody passes through doing anything on a huge level either. We're not saying that. Though here's the thing, and listening to Abraham Hicks and also Wayne Dyer and definitely Oprah and the great thinkers, is it helps me a lot when I remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. It really helps me to shift out of it, because it's easy when that contrast presents itself. When the life tests or quizzes present themselves, that this is an opportunity for me to grow. And I realize that is a super tough sell when you're in it. However, when we look back, the dots do connect. It all unfolded the way it was meant to. The hard times, um, we often have memories of the coming together with, support and everything. Like, even a funeral, is horrible as funerals are, and some are worse than others. Obviously, losing a child is not the same thing as losing an 80-year-old who had a full life. We're not can't that's a we can't even put that in the same place. But think of, like, let's just go with the 80-year-old. So 80-year-old, it's a funeral, and they had a full life and everything, and it's sad to lose that grandparent, or maybe that's a great grandparent, or maybe that's a parent for you, or maybe it's a partner, right? That there's never ever a good time for this loss. Though then when we look back, often what we remember is all the good things said about that person, and everybody coming together. People we may not have seen for years came all the way, flew in on airplanes, and drove long distances. And then there's the people who don't even know us that well, who bring covered dishes and things like that to help make our lives a little easier for the next couple weeks while we kind of, adjust, to that loss. And this is kind of what Richard Carlson's books are. These "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff" books are all about. And then underneath in the little letters, it's like, and it's all small stuff. And for the most part, it all is small stuff. Thankfully, we don't get those phone calls about somebody dying, a car accident, very often. Thankfully, it's not very often. So when we get super worked up about all the little crap that happens daily, somebody was snarky by the water cooler, somebody was gossiping, somebody left you out of a lunch plan, that, whatever, whatever, whatever. Not that all that isn't hurtful. We're not saying that, and uncalled for, and the rest of it. But if we get worked up to DEFCON 4 level each time somebody leaves us out of something, or whatever happens with SARC, somebody snags something out from under your work, whatever, whatever, whatever. If we get that worked up on all that little crap, doesn't seem little at the time, but it is in the scheme of losing a loved one. It's just not the same, right? Never mind everything going on in the world that's huge, and people in different situations in different countries suffering with political this and political that and violence and everything else. All that little crap, it is all small stuff. So we don't want to use the juice. We don't want to be a DEFCON 4 when it doesn't even make it onto the radar, really. We want to save it up for when we really truly need it, for something that happens in our own life, or maybe in the life of somebody we really care about, which is also our own life, of course. And then we can go full throttle, wrap around like a burrito, to wrap around ourselves and our families, or the friend, or whomever. We just don't want to use up that juice on things that don't warrant it. I'll just repeat this a little bit. Remember, the only people without problems are dead. I'm just getting a little reminder right there. Okay, so Richard Carlson says, whether you're being bombarded with problems, responsibilities, even insurmountable hurdles, when looked at as a test, you always have a chance to succeed, in the sense of rising above that which is challenging you. If, on the other hand, you see each new issue you face as a serious battle that must be won in order to survive, you're probably in for a very rocky journey. The only time you're likely to be happy is when everything is working out just right. Uh, that's a tough road right there, and we all know how often that happens. We also don't want to be outcome based. We've talked about that a gazillion times. Wayne Dyer's super big on that. Abraham Hicks also super big on that. Because when we attach to outcomes, things working out exactly as we want to, that means it's all external. That means our needs and our happiness are dependent on other people and other things happening outside of us, of which we have very little, if any, control. Think about that. That sets us up to at best be less than happy and more than likely miserable because we've given our own agency, our own autonomy, our own control up in a silver platter. It's just or beautiful Italian china. Like, here you go. I'm just giving you my power. That is not what we want to do. And also, that is also in addition to making us super unhappy, that's also self abandonment. And there is nothing worse you can do to yourself. So you want to bring that back in the frame, realizing that the happiness all occurs, all of it, on the inside of your own frame where you're basking in your own authenticity. None of it happens externally. None of it. And then Richard says, as an experiment, see if you can apply this idea to something you are forced to deal with. Perhaps you have a difficult teenager or a demanding boss. I'm going to throw in their work politics because they can be really, really challenging with the whole power differential thing. See if you can define the issue you face from being a problem to being a test. Rather than struggling with your issue, see if there's something you can learn from it. And again, I realize this is a tough sell, but this is a super good lesson. Ask yourself, what is this issue in, oh, sorry, why is this issue in my life? Why is this issue in my life? What could it mean? And what would be involved to rise above it? Could I possibly look at this issue any differently? Can I see it as a test of some kind? And I have to tell you right now, my very best friend from growing up and we have lots of talk. We talk every couple of weeks. Basically, it goes in splurges, but it doesn't go. We don't ever go too long without talking. Usually, it's around every 2 to 3 weeks. If any of you read the 7 Days article, she's the rooftop friend. I'm not sure I know anybody more self-aware than her, to be quite honest. And we both have a little bit of contrast going on in our lives. It's not DEFCON 4, but it's clearly redirecting us. And we kind of both at the same time, entirely different contexts. And we both really talked about this whole quiz thing. And we also went to high school together. And I was thinking of my favorite teacher ever. My favorite teacher. A lot of people don't have one. I definitely do. His name was Mr. Serco, and he was my physics teacher. And I will tell you, stay with me because I'm going to roll right back into what we're talking about. I ended up loving physics. But I've always liked science, but I'm not sure I would have been a huge physics fan without this wonderful man in my life back then. And he dressed like the 50s. He had the white shirt, like Archie Bunker, with the black pants and the horn rimmed glasses. I loved him. Okay, so here's where it applies to what we're talking about. It's the only time in my entire educational experience I had ever had this situation. He didn't do any big tests. He didn't do papers either. It's a hard science, so it was all labs and quizzes. And so he allowed forever till the end of this semester to retake any quiz you wanted to, even if you're 2 months in, you wanted to take the second quiz over again, you could take it 15 times if you wanted to, and he would swap out the grade. Now obviously, in order to challenge you, it wasn't the exact quiz, it was the same exact content, but he reworded questions and things like that, so you really had to work. But no matter what, you could be successful. So here's what this is this here's sort of the metaphor with what we're talking about, is that this is what we're talking about with life throwing us quizzes, and what my best friend from growing up, my rooftop friend, and I talked about for about an hour and 15 minutes while I waited for my snow tires to be switched at the mechanic and an oil change. Hour and 15 minutes about this. That life, and Oprah talks about this a lot. Life throwing us a quiz. So his quizzes, Mr. Circo's quizzes, were out of 10. So if you got an 8 out of 10, 8.5, I don't think he did points. I don't think so. Okay, so let's say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Okay, an 8 is considered a B, so that's above average. A 9 is considered an A, okay. But if you wanted that 10, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. So it's kind of like the universe or God or source, whatever you want to say, to keep these tests, these quizzes, these little quizzes keep showing up. Even if a month goes by, months, years go by. And my my friend and I kept talking about it, like, why does this keep showing up? This particular contrast situation we both had, different contexts, and we both said it to each other's because clearly we didn't pass the quiz yet. And we think we're pretty close. We have a ton of insight. She and I are very self aware, and we have these discussions constantly. But clearly, we don't have a 10 out of 10 yet. And that's why it keeps showing up wearing different outfits in a different place. And we also, again, we talked about this, it must be we have, another percentage point to go or something because because we're on it. That's the weird thing. That's why we're both so like, okay, what's up with this universe? Come on, for us it's God, but universe, source, whatever. And we also circled back around to the even though it's a tough sell, really embracing it in our conversation. And it was so wonderfully helpful to be, mutually supportive with our each one in our circumstances because we gave each other wonderful insight and also reminded ourselves that again, life doesn't happen to us, but happens for us. And it points us in a different direction. And then that, like we talked about earlier too, with my good friend Tom and his synchronicity guy. That's what we'll call him from now on. Once we get sort of turned on to the fact that contrast is part of our whole ride on this earth, is going to happen. So rather than resist it, Carl Jung, famous psychoanalyst, so that which we resist will persist, right? So we dig our claws in, it just makes it bigger and harder and everything. When we realize contrast coming by, rather than digging our claws in, to just acknowledge it. We're not giving snarkies passes and things like that. We're acknowledging it. We can also learn to be quietly effective, which is taking the high road, not proving a point, smiling and nodding. And in our heads, we're taking the high road and realizing that these players and whatever contrast is going on are all part of our story. Again, not giving passes, just acknowledging with just openness and acceptance of contrast. Again, not accepting horrible behavior, just accepting that this contrast is pointing us another direction and that it will always work out in our best interest in the end. In the end, the dots do connect. When we look back, right, again, it's a tough sell in it when we're in it. When we look back, we got fired, somebody did this, that, and then we look back 5 or 10 years later, maybe not even close to that, like, oh my God, it was horrible. But thank God I ended up in this dream job. If I didn't get the dream job, I wouldn't have moved, wouldn't have met this person. Like that. This is how it happens. And so the contrast is there, is part of our spiritual journey. And the people that are in it are sort of actors on the stage. And I think once we remember that, it gets easier to not react, definitely not to overreact, and to not sweat the small stuff as much, which is what Richard Carlson's book series is about, and to save a lot of that energy, for when there really is a huge curveball, because that's what we really want to do. Life is a series of quizzes. That's it. And not only is it not an emergency, it's not even an urgency most of the time, thankfully. Okay, this is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.